Hey folks, how's it going? Gonna give everyone a few minutes here. All right. Welcome to the channel, folks. Just getting started today. Got a few things going live here, and just wanted to let you guys know that I am doing the fundraiser again for Farm Aid. I don't know if you guys heard about what's going on in Nebraska, but Nebraska is something like 2 quarters away from being bankrupt. The software that I'm using to do the live stream, which is called StreamYard.com, when you guys donate, it doesn't actually show up on my screen. So just write in the comments when you guys do donate so I know who to thank. Because last time I really did know who to thank. I want to thank my Patreon subscribers right now. There's only a few of you guys. Off the top of my head, I can remember Smokey Joe, April. I can remember Don Caesar Shadum and a few other people who have rejoined my Patreon after me being inactive for quite some time. Full transparency here, I'm actually writing a competitor to Patreon at some point. I'm going to use my own software to do this. I am just not interested in handing 5 to 8% of my earnings to Patreon for as long as I continue to do this. I also think that other YouTubers shouldn't be handing 5 to 8% of their dues to Patreon as well. So I will be writing a competitor to that. It'll probably come out sometime next year, and I'm going to charge something like 1.5%, which would be enough to cover the costs and make money as well. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about unemployment, because that has been on my mind, even though the unemployment report that came out 6 days ago didn't really reflect that. And let's talk about why it didn't really reflect what's going on in the unemployment picture. And that has to do with when those layoffs happen. The vast majority of those happen on the 14th of basically on Valentine's Day. So weekly jobless claims increased from 22,000 to 242,000 6 days ago. That was a huge increase, but that increase is mostly blamed on the weather. So the larger than expected initial rise in claims, as reported by the Labor Department, was likely due to snowstorms in many parts of the country. So even in extreme winter weather, chiefly responsible for the pickup in initial claims last week, that's what they're saying. But they had forecast 221,000 claims for the week. It was a little bit over that. That is not signaling that we're in the danger zone yet for the economy. Generally, it is when unemployment is above 350,000 claims per week. That's kind of when we start to get a little bit worried. So here is what's going on, though. Most federal probationary workers were fired around February 14th, right around Valentine's Day. More layoffs are coming as part of an unprecedented campaign by the Trump administration. Our estimate currently implies a loss of federal full-time employees between 200,000 and 300,000, and another 450,000 contractors. So somewhere between 750,000 or 650,000 and 750,000 people have already been laid off in this environment. They just haven't hit the unemployment figures yet because they're probably not finished filing the claims, or claims haven't been processed. So this is going to cause more economic hardship than just the 2 to 300,000 people who've been laid off. And folks, we haven't even gotten to the DOD at this point. I think if they were really interested in efficiency, that the Department of Defense is the first department that they would have gone after, because that's where the largest amount of waste is, and it's where they have the largest budget. We're talking $840 billion a year right now. And I've talked about this before on my live stream. I've seen a lot of the end of year requests to use budget dollars. And I've seen a lot of the requisitions that go out for military contractors. I know there's tons of waste there. And the fact that they didn't go after the Department of Defense first kind of tells me that a lot of this is for show. That the folks cutting jobs right now, federal jobs, like forestry workers, USAID workers who are in charge of buying contracts for a lot of farmers as well. Those have dried up at this point, but it's also caused a lot of contractor jobs to be lost as well. Not all of these are super high paid jobs. A lot of these are part-time workers that work for one federal contractor or another, but it's somewhere around 450,000 contractors. This is not good for our economy. and laying off 200,000 to 300,000 federal workers is going to have a lot more harm than just those 2 or 300,000 people being unemployed. So, Hal says some people use Ko-fi, but it's again 5%. Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with the economics of how a Patreon would be run. The vast majority of people who run Patreon basically just use it to, or who use Patreon, just use it to post videos, post updates, and host a Discord, right? They're not doing a lot beyond that. And the 5 to 8% that Patreon is charging, I'm not saying it's criminal. It's just they don't have a lot of competition based on price. So, yeah. They are launching massive fraud investigations into these departments without tons of auditors. They're not launching fraud investigations. Basically, everything that they're pulling out and posting onto social media is what was already in the publicly available budgets. Let me rephrase that. Those budgets were publicly available before DOJ went through and erased them off the websites, but nothing that they published so far has been something that wasn't on the publicly disclosed budget. Also, if you look at the actual contract savings, a lot of times they're posting things where the money has already been spent or the contract has already hit the maximum. What they want to go after are the IQ-ID contracts for the Department of Defense, where it's called IQ-ID is indefinite quantity, indefinite delivery, meaning we don't know how much you're going to make and we don't know when it's going to be delivered, right? That type of contract. So a lot of those contracts are put in for services. A lot of those are put in for like software services or, upgrading, different types of equipment. So that's where you see the largest amount of room for fraud. But I've seen some waste and abuse that's just like dumb, like end of year spending for a military base where they go through and buy a bunch of 4K televisions, right? And somehow that's included in their budget. So, but now at this point, there's probably been less than, I don't know, I want to say probably less than $10 billion saved. The numbers that they're saving, like $80 billion or something like that, absolutely a misinterpretation of what is being presented out there. What Trump is trying to do is create a surplus for whatever he desires. I don't necessarily think he's trying to do that. He's just trying to flood the zone with as much disinformation as possible. He's essentially following the dictator's playbook or the authoritarian playbook when it comes to creating a false reality. That's all that he's doing. Everything that DOJ has published so far was in the budget. The idea that they're calling it, corruption or money laundering is actually just kind of ridiculous. You can trace all of these dollars. Now, I certainly don't approve of all of the spending. Like, I don't know why we were doing DEI plays in Serbia or something like that, or I don't remember which company or which country that was in. But a lot of the things that they are talking about as being fraudulent or being wasteful or money laundering, some of those are going to be cover for intelligence operations that are done under diplomatic cover or under the cover of NGOs. A lot of those are simply influence operations, and it's an extension of our soft power. Our soft power has been our largest weapon in the ideological wars that we have fought with authoritarian governments all over the world, meaning, basically convincing people that capitalism, free markets, and democracy was a better option than authoritarianism. It's allowed us to basically just ask for things that we wanted without having to coerce people. The thing that I don't like about the current administration right now is that we're basically committing acts of economic war against our allies to coerce them into doing things that we want them to do economically. Some of the things they can accomplish and some of them they cannot. Like, Americans don't want to hear this, but our drug problem is our problem. No one is forcing people to take fentanyl. People are taking fentanyl because they're choosing to take fentanyl or choosing to take some other type of drug or taking a pill that they have no idea what's in it. The cartels, I hate them, of course, but they are simply fulfilling a desire that the U.S. market has. If we stopped using drugs, the cartels simply wouldn't have a market here. Yes, we are responsible for securing our border. And the issue that Canada is allowing, fentanyl and illegal immigrants to come over their border and that they needed to do something to shore up that's absolute BS. In fact, Canada has a far bigger problem with illegal weapons and drugs coming from the American side into Canada than it does in the opposite direction. particularly Trump going after Canada, our staunchest ally and best friend over the last 100 years or so, I think is absolutely disgusting. I understand, I don't approve, of course, but I understand why Canadians are booing the national anthem at sporting events. This attack on their sovereignty, and that's what it really is has basically come out of nowhere. They've always had tariffs on certain goods for certain industries that they wanted to protect, just like we've always had tariffs on certain goods for certain industries that we wanted to protect that we aren't competitive in. And those tariffs and restrictions were all negotiated through the USMCA, which was passed in 2018, which was negotiated by Donald Trump and was signed by Donald Trump. The fact that we have an increasing trade deficit with Canada, something like $200 billion a year, has to do with the fact that they have a lot of natural resources that we want, and we don't have a lot of products to sell them back. We don't have a lot of finished products that we could sell them back and sort of like laddering up that market scale. But the biggest thing that they're selling us that wasn't anticipated in USMCA is energy, right? And here's the thing: if the pipeline, the Keystone XL pipeline was completed, it was never completed. It was never in operation. There was never 10,000 jobs lost from the Keystone XL pipeline. The Keystone pipeline is still in operation, but the Keystone XL was never in operation. Only a small percentage of it was completed. I think none of that was actually in the United States. But if that had been completed, because the largest source of deficit in the United States from Canada is actually the oil exports, it would have been a lot worse than $200 billion. A lot worse than $200 billion. Now, I watch, but don't participate in a lot of social media, and I've engineered my algorithm to feed me a lot of right-wing stuff. And the amount of disinformation and propaganda is absolutely insane. It's gotten to the point where I kind of understand where someone with very little education or very little desire to question anything that comes across their feed would believe what's going on. But the propaganda is actually not very sophisticated at all. Like, you can go up and look at all these numbers and figure out what's going on for yourself if you want to do the research. But the attack on Canada in particular is concerning. Additionally, you need to pay attention to social media, and you need to pay attention to something to basically information warfare. I believe that information conditions are being set right now for the United States to strike militarily on Mexico at some point. I don't believe that we want to take over parts of northern Mexico. I don't believe that we want to, occupy Mexico or anything like that. But I do believe that the Republicans wish to strike Mexico for one reason or another, to spread fear, to create this exegesis of patriotic fervor that would actually probably scare the Canadians more than anything else. And I just don't believe that this is long-term in our national interest, that we've always gotten things by negotiating in a calm, rational, and adult manner with our two closest allies. And I think what we're doing now is not going to help us in the long run. So GC, they need to cut EV credits. I'm on the fence about that. I don't know if they need to cut EV credits or not. The EV industry probably no longer needs those EV credits to survive. But if you look at the credits that are essentially right now, Tesla is not going to be able to compete with Chinese vehicles overseas at this point. The involvement of Elon Musk in elections outside of the United States, meaning the involvement of Elon Musk in elections in Canada, which he is inserting himself in their elections there, inserting himself into elections in Germany, inserting himself into politics in the United Kingdom, that has basically destroyed his wealthiest market outside of the United States. In China, he faces enormous competition, particularly from BYD. BYD has quite simply outcompeted and out-innovated Tesla in China at this point. Even BYD doesn't have a lock on the Chinese market. The Chinese market is just incredibly vast when it comes to EVs. The credits and the ability. So China has a weird thing going on there. Like, if you want to buy a vehicle in China, in one of the major cities, you actually have to go to an auction to buy your license plates if you have an internal combustion engine. Those license plates can cost you, I don't know what the market is now, but a few years ago, it was costing between $12,000 and $16,000 to win an auction for a license plate. But if you bought an EV, you were able to bypass that auction. That's still the case today, that if you buy an electric vehicle, then you don't have to go through the sort of the license plate auction. You're just basically awarded one for a fee. So in that respect, he's got a lot of competition in China. The vehicles are in China that he sells there are overpriced compared to a lot of their competitors, but particularly when it comes to BYD. BYD's has less sophisticated manufacturing, but better finished manufacturing than Tesla in a lot of ways. And that's really happened over the last 10 years or so. They've really climbed up that scale in terms of manufacturing quality. But let's remember, there's actually just a lot less to an electric vehicle than there is to an internal combustion engine. They're a lot more simple to produce. The motors have a lot fewer moving parts. So the race has really been software at this point. And it hasn't been, and let's be honest, the Chinese lead in battery innovation at this point. It's no longer just copying what the scientists in the United States have done. They're publishing a lot right now. Like, I read a lot of scientific papers in my free time because I'm that kind of a nerd, and a lot of white papers. And Chinese scientists are charging full bore ahead when it comes to energy storage technologies. And at this point, they are beating the pants off of us. I think that a lot of the mania and the frenetic behavior that Elon Musk is displaying right now is because he knows he's being outcompeted. If BYD were to come to the United States, they would put Tesla out of business. The only thing that would save Tesla is patriotism, that it's an American-made car, but he's turned off so much of his market here that I just don't think that I think they're in for a lot of pain. And I think that at some point, the board at Tesla is going to do the same thing to him that he has done to federal workers. They're going to send him an email and say, name 5 things that you've done for Tesla shareholders in the last week. And when he's unable to answer those questions, I think they're going to make a move to get rid of him. And I think it's time. As a former Tesla shareholder, I no longer have a stake in Tesla, but I think current Tesla shareholders, if you want to hold through this, you should be advocating for someone else to take the reins. Let's also look at the Tesla Cybertruck and the success of the Cybertruck as a product. That is the first product that was not part of the original line. So originally the 2 owners, I forget their names right now because it's been so long since they were involved, but the Roadster, the Model 3, the Model S, and the Model X, and the Model Y were basically all their babies. These were the types of cars that they designed, the order in which they developed them, meaning you're going from this, necessarily high margin, very expensive vehicle, going after, creating this brand loyalty, working your way down that scale till you get to an affordable Model 3, which the Model 3 is debatably, not really all that affordable now. All of those down to the Model 3 were actually that original, the original founder's brainchild in terms of auto development. The Tesla, a Cybertruck is really Elon's baby, and it's the first thing that he's come out with. And I think it was a massive design mistake to design a truck that doesn't look like a truck, right? In terms of it being an electric vehicle, I think that the performance, the give and the take between the Rivian and the Cybertruck in terms of performance is equal. And I think it's really just the design and the looks of the Cybertruck that make it a failure. Meaning the Rivian's truck is just as good as the Cybertruck. It has some advantages and it has some disadvantages, but it looks like a truck, right? He wanted something that didn't look like a truck, and I think he made some fatal design flaws. No Cybertruck that's been driven for more than 3 months looks good anymore. You're always going to see flaws in that truck because of how it was assembled and because of simple design flaws. Flat panels and straight lines lay bare every single flaw that's out there, and you're going to find them if you look hard enough. So Young Kang says, thank you for your knowledge. Young Kang, were you a subscriber for a long time? I think I remember your name being around at some point. But other than BYD, I have not really followed Chinese EVs as closely as I did in the past, largely because I got very nervous about the Chinese stock market for a couple of different reasons. So I haven't actually followed it as closely as I have. I did see that XPeng is doing well, and NIO, like I predicted, is not doing as well as XPeng. Now, let's remember that I predicted this way back in 2020 that XPeng was going to overtake NIO, largely because they owned their entire development stack, and they weren't tied to a government-owned builder like JAC is. They were also when I say they own their entire development stack, they're basically completely vertically integrated. They own everything from producing tires and batteries to all the way up. They've managed to their CEO Xiaopeng. He's not as popular in the United States. He's very well known in China, though. He's very loud and in China makes a splash wherever he goes. But for some reason, I think mostly because he's kind of ugly. He just hasn't been as big a celebrity here as yeah. So here we go. What do you think about Tesla Energy Division, and do you have an opinion on their 4680 battery design? I think that they're still having production issues with the 4680 that they're not really telling us about. I think that the 4680 battery design was a great way of making small improvements in every step of the battery to add up to about a 50% improvement in efficiency and cost. I think it was great. I think that they are falling behind in certain steps with production, and they haven't really mastered production of that. So, Jason, what do you mean by the original founders? I wasn't aware of their involvement beyond the first Roadster. No, they actually had their entire line of cars planned all the way up to the Model 3. The entire plan of going from the Roadster all the way down to an affordable family car, that was their original plan. Beyond the Model 3, everything beyond the Model 3 has been this new group of managers' plans. So it was the two original founders. They did an interview on this about 5 or 6 years ago, or no, it may have been almost 10 years ago, where they outlined their entire plan of what they were going to do with the company. And they didn't have the names of the models, they didn't have the designs, but they had basically, the Roadster, make a big splash, generate excitement. The Model S, the luxury car, basically for gadget geeks who have tons of disposable money, who are going to look to create this brand of aware people with tons of money who can afford this kind of thing. Move down to the Model X, looks a little bit more like an SUV, although it's not really an SUV. And then finally you get down to the family sedan, right? So they didn't have names for those models or anything, but that is basically what they had planned. Beyond the Model 3, I don't even think the Model Y was part of their original plan, but the Cybertruck is the first thing that is really completely part of outside of their plan, and it's been a failure. So yes, maybe for 3 years we missed your absence. Yes, Young Kang, thank you. My absence was due to the fact that I started the new business, and honestly, I got a little bit depressed with always talking to the same 20 people on my live streams. I'm over that now. I'm also over the fact that I'll never be really that successful on YouTube. And I'm not doing this now for the type of success that I wanted to achieve. I realized that I got addicted to positive comments and likes and things like that. And that's not really what I do this for. I really do this because I need the outlet to talk about the things that I'm interested in. So Cybertruck is a failure. It's also banned in the UK. As far as I know, it's banned in the UK. Is it banned in the UK just because of size restrictions or something like that? I don't know. Elon is definitely on drugs. You see, Canada is still part of the British Commonwealth. They might have something to say about Trump's plan to annex Canada. There's a lot of people out that I was listening to briefly while I was working today on another project. I was listening to Mr. Global talk about the Canada hate in the United States right now. Online, there's a lot of Canada hate. basically Canadians are the nicest people on the planet, the most polite people on the planet. But they really only have two modes of it's I'm sorry or you're going to be sorry. Right. And I think that us invading Canada would possibly be the biggest mistake. It would instantly be another Vietnam where we have a population that looks a lot like us, speaks the same language. And if you aren't aware that most of the Geneva Convention was actually written because of Canadian soldiers and the things they did to Germans. Okay, I think this would be a terrible idea for us to try to annex Canada, even if Canada voted to join the United States. I still think it's a terrible idea to annex Canada. We would see a lot of discontent. And apparently nobody on social media has ever met someone from Quebec. They are never, ever going to join the United States willingly. That they're barely in Canada willingly. And their French is almost incomprehensible in certain areas. Then a lot of them don't speak English at all, which kind of blew me away. The first time I went there, I thought that most people from Quebec would speak English. I was surprised that once you got outside of Montreal and Quebec City, that a lot of people did not. And then when you went further back into the countryside there, like I had a really hard time understanding the French there. People had to speak really slowly to me like I was a baby for me to understand because their accent is just so different. But that's not the reason I don't think they're going to fit into the United States. They're not going to fit into the United States because they're radically different to us socially. And I don't think we would be willing to make accommodations for them. And they would not be willing to make accommodations for us. So, thanks for the live stream, Jason. I'm curious if you think the S&P is currently overvalued. I do think it's currently overvalued. I think it's been overvalued for close to 18 months. Like severely overvalued. It's basically been overvalued with few interruptions since 2015, 2016. It's been above historical norms. And a lot of that is because of how many more people are participating in buying and owning stocks. I also think that when the crash happens, and I think it will happen, we're going to see a deterioration of the economy going forward. What I had hoped would be an orderly unwinding of a very long credit cycle, meaning that we gradually increase unemployment over time. I don't think that's going to happen. Like I said, I believe that somewhere between 650 and 750,000 jobs have already been lost in the last month. For two reasons, federal workers actually have a separate system to report unemployment to. I forget what it's called. It's called like OCE, something or other. I forget what it's called. But they have a separate system to report to. I just don't think that those have actually been recorded. Remember, they also got this deal that they could take where you're going to get paid for 9 months, but you don't have to show up for work. But then they emailed them later and said, oh, yeah, actually, you do have to show up for work. And then they fired some people, and some of those firings were reversed. I just don't think that a lot of this is actually hitting economic numbers at this point. But as the weeks go on, we are actually going to see that. And let's remember, all of these people are consumers, and we are a consumer economy. If they're unemployed, they're not out there buying anything beyond the staples. And this is why, if you watch the video that I put out today, this is why I recommended, sector rotation at this point. If you've never owned a Johnson & Johnson or a Colgate or anything like that, it may be a good time to start looking into those, because their profits are not going to be affected as much by inflation, particularly because people are already primed to expect inflation because of tariffs. They're going to be able to raise prices on staples more quickly, and demand for those products can only go down so far. It can only go down so far because we have to have toothpaste to live. We have to have razors to live. We have to have, shampoo, even if it's cheap shampoo, to live. So a lot of these companies produce very low priced, shelf stable items that can also be sold in bulk, and retailers are making a good deal of money on those too. So I think that rotating to sector staples is going to be good. Here's where I think that people need to watch out for. With the rise in tariffs on China, China's much better relationship with Brazil now, and much better relationship with agriculture in Southeast Asia and in India, we are looking at probably a crash in corn, wheat, and soybean prices. Combine that with delayed funding, and it's planning season for a lot of people right now, or in the next month, it's going to be planning season for a lot of the Midwest. Combine that with with the tariffs and the delayed funding because of the cancellation of USAID projects and a lot of farm aid that's going out there. We're looking at a lot of farmers hurting. They're not going to be able to guarantee prices going in the future. This is one of the things that USAID contracts did for farmers that were producing food for international aid, is they had guaranteed prices for their products, which was a great thing. Farmers who are really good at trading, futures are going to do really well. Farmers that aren't sophisticated enough, and let's be honest here, guys. I think, because I know a lot of farmers and I grew up around, quite a bit of farmers, you're underestimating how smart these guys are. A lot of these guys have college degrees. They have degrees in soil chemistry. They have degrees in business. They have they've gone out and they've studied. They're educated folks. To say they didn't understand what was going on with Project 2025, or they didn't think it was part of this agenda, this is disingenuous. I'm not going to blame farmers. I'm not going to shed on them on this podcast, but I am going to say is that you voted against other people's interests, and you did not realize that it was going to blow back on you. And I'm still going to provide you sympathy, even though I think that you need to do a little introspection, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing a fundraiser for Farm Aid now, because I think it's really important to support family farms. I think it's extremely important to support family farms. I like the fact that we have huge diversification in our food production. We have less diversification in food production right now because of certain crop types are just more profitable, less prone to like corn borer, less prone to certain viruses. So we have a lot less crop diversification than we had in the past. But I think that having diversification among growers, like lots of small family farms, even though on economies of scale, it probably keeps prices a little bit higher, it's a lot safer than having, 3 or 4 companies controlling growing and distribution, which is kind of what we have with cattle. When it comes to meat packing, you have like 4 producers that control everything. So yeah. I read the post the other day. I no longer see it up, but I wanted to ask what you think would happen to interest rates if unemployment got very high. I haven't canceled any posts. It may have gotten posted. I don't know. Maybe I made a nasty comment or something, and YouTube deleted that post. I've made nastier comments to people than I have in the past. So, yeah. So, what do you think of interest rates going to happen if unemployment goes high? Well, interest rates are going to decline if unemployment goes high. They're going to want to create more liquidity in the economy. Like, one of the things that happens when the economy starts to decline is that we see liquidity dry up. And by liquidity, I mean the ability or the desire for banks to loan money to businesses, right? Not so much to individuals. It's loaning money to businesses so they can expand operations and do what they need to do. We're probably looking at relatively quickly. I think that we're going to see, especially as we see deposits start to decline for certain businesses, we're going to see that their lines of credit are going to get restricted or even discontinued altogether. And that's when you see interest rates start, or that's when you're going to see them start to decline. They're going to want to create liquidity. We're also probably going to see not the Federal Reserve. Yes, you're probably going to see the Federal Reserve have to step in and backstop like short-term securities and overnight securities like they have done in the past. This just isn't a healthy market anymore. It was a healthy market through 2008, and then the commercial paper market has not been healthy since and it just hasn't been healthy for a very, very long time. So, the wheels are coming off. That wasn't a YouTube post. That was a Patreon post. If you are a member of my Patreon, you may still be getting notifications that I'm putting posts up, but those are only those posts right now, which I'm doing once or twice a week, where I'm talking a little bit more openly about different stocks. those are just limited to my Patreon members right now. So my Patreon's only $5 a month. I think I've only got like 7 members right now. But if you guys want to join, I'd be more than happy. And that's the easiest way to get in contact with me. So, oh, Don says, thanks for tuning in. Great Patreon post. Hey man, that was like perfect right when I was plugging my Patreon. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to check one thing here and see. I want to see if we got any more donations to, so I can't tell if we got any donations to, the fundraiser that I was doing. So let's talk about one other thing here. I want to talk about this number right here. This is pretty important. Something that we don't really talk about very often, but I talk about on my, or at least I think about it all the time, is labor force participation. So the United States is facing a crisis when it comes to labor force participation. Labor force participation has been declining since 2005, and it seems to be stuck. It's gone, around 2005, we were at roughly 66%. Today, it's down to 62.2%. You can expect this number to get worse. And there's a couple of reasons why. If I look at participation for Black or African-American workers, after 2020, it actually went up to above the average, and now it's right around the average. I think it's within like 0.2 percentage points of the average. If I look at the participation for Asian American workers, it's been above that historical average. It's still above that historical average by a good 2%, and it's been that way roughly since the 2008 timeframe. If I look at Hispanic or Latino, guys, there's no group of workers that is participating at a higher rate in our economy than Hispanic or Latino workers. And I just don't understand the hate that people have for them. And I see it all the time in social media. And social media is not the real world. Unfortunately, I see a lot of that in the real world as well. I hear a lot of things that are said. I don't know why people think I'm going to agree with this, but people say things in front of me that are absolutely unconscionable. But I don't know why you'd want to alienate the group of people that actually participates the most in our workforce. The only group that has declined, let's guess, the only group where participation has declined, but it's really acute in men 20 years or older. It's gone from roughly 76.2% down to 70.3% in the last 20 years or so. Since it was at 71% in just prior to the pandemic, and now it's a full percentage point below where it was. So that number has not recovered for men over 20 or so. When it comes to women over 40, traditionally they've been lower than the average. They've just had lower participation because a lot of them are stay at home. That number, the increase really, if there was a large increase in the participation rate for women over the same time period, that sort of would suggest that more men are being stay-at-home dads and the woman's the breadwinner, then I would say that this isn't worrying. That's just not the case. Fewer and fewer people are participating in the workforce, and we need to understand why that is. I do not understand why that is. I don't understand. And I've read in a couple of different places, and I'll be honest with you, I haven't looked at the research behind this, so I don't know how true this is, that claims that there are 10 million working age men between 20 and 45, or so 10 million who just aren't working. So I don't know why that is. Are they just at home playing video games? How is labor force participation rate counted? Would I be counted? Because I'm self-employed. It's not clear that I have a job, right? It's just, I just split my day between the different businesses that I have, and I kind of work on each one as it's required for me to work on those. And I kind of do this YouTube stuff on the side, but it's not exactly clear that I'm employed. So I wonder if I'm even counted in that. So I don't know how this employment situation is counted, but we kind of need to take a look at that. The other thing that's an indication, hold on a second. It's not clear that I currently have a job as well. However, I am earning income. Yeah. So you don't know how you're being counted in terms of labor force participation. So I don't know that there's actually 10 million men sitting at home of working age, just not working and living in their parents' basement and playing video games. I know that there are some, because everyone knows someone where that's the case, where some guy is in his late 30s, who basically dropped out of the workforce 10 years ago and has been living off of his parents ever since. Everyone knows one or two of those guys. And it's hard to feel sorry for those guys in some respect. You can't be a burden on your parents forever. But I don't think this is as wide a problem as the media would have us believe. I think it's more isolated than people think. So, yeah. Have you seen the crazy ETF DXYZ? It has SpaceX and OpenAI, but I wouldn't touch it. I have not seen this. ArcVX, have I seen this? It's on SoFi, 15% SpaceX, 3% OpenAI. Seems interesting. It does seem interesting. I have my issues with OpenAI right now. Like, what is their pathway to opening up investment to the general public, right? Since they abandoned their plans to be a nonprofit, I'm not convinced that they necessarily have a way forward when it comes to business. I really want to see a more solid business plan. 15% SpaceX. So there are a lot. If you go look at the list of scheduled launches, and let me see if I can find, let me see here. Rocket Launch Live. If you go to rocketlaunch.live and you look at rocket launches that are going on, there are a lot. SpaceX is most of these launches right now, but Electron, Angara 1.2 series, Electron, Soyuz 2, Long March, Atlas, Eris, more Electron, was it GSLV2, Alpha Firefly. Firefly is actually pretty cool. I've seen a couple of those go off late at night, and they look like UFOs when they're launched. They look crazy when they're launched because they launch the ones that I've seen. They have a different burn color. They burn more orange. They come off in two stages. So you see this bright light streaking across the sky without as much of a trail behind it. And because they're not doing it right at dusk, you don't see the light reflecting off of this gas. So it streaks across the sky and then it goes out and then it pops up again, a couple of degrees across the horizon there and starts burning again. It's really wild looking when it goes off, these Firefly rockets. And I think that's a Grumman Firefly rocket that's going off. But if you look, there are a lot more space providers now than there were a few years ago. And a lot of these are being launched by the European Space Agency. A lot of them are being launched by private companies right here in the United States. France, Germany, India, Israel, Japan, everyone is launching things into space right now. The idea that SpaceX has a lock on government contracts, I think if a new administration comes in, I think that business is going to be reconsidered because of Elon Musk's involvement in the government. He's also wildly misleading you on security clearances, talking about I've got security clearances that no one even knows about. If aliens existed, I would know because I have security clearance, or if this, whatever. Like, that's not how it works, guys. That's not how it works. You get a top secret clearance, you get top secret, TS/SCI clearance, and then you're read in on a project by project basis. You get tickets for that project if you have a need to know, and the person who determines whether or not you have a need to know is the project controller, right? And there's a couple of different words for that project controller depending on who you work for. But that's who determines whether or not you can look at stuff. Not even, no one in Congress can just go through, no one in any position could just go through and say, hey, man, I want to see where the aliens are stored at Area 51 or at Dugway Proving Grounds or at, Dulce Base. Like, no one can say that. That's not the way it works, guys. Which leads me to believe that he hasn't been trusted with a lot of the things, even within his own company. I think that there are probably people that do have extraordinary clearances at SpaceX, and it's probably not him. So You don't think that Elon can get back into favor with Democrats with tremendous donations. Democrats are still politicians. Of course, he can buy justice in this country. He's the richest man in the world. Of course, he can buy influence in this country. He's the richest man in the world. So yes, I do think he can get back into favor with Democrats. I don't know that he can get back into favor with people who believe in democracy. I know that I'm kind of not necessarily unique, but I generally don't comment on foreign democracies because I don't believe that even me, with the small voices I have, should really be influencing other democracies. And I find it enormously distasteful when an American billionaire goes over to to any other country and does anything except support political openness and fair elections. Which I believe that he is not doing at this point. So there's been a lot of American billionaires who've done that. So Europe has turned against Tesla, not just turned against Tesla, but turned against in a big way. I've seen even California is turning against Tesla, and this was Tesla's home for many years. I turned against Tesla when he turned Twitter into a Nazi hellscape. I don't like Nazis, guys. I really don't like Nazis. And every time I make a negative comment about Nazis in my personal life, and I not every time, but every once in a while I hear, well, why don't you just say you don't like Nazis? And I'm like, guys, of course I don't. Like, why would I? But I don't like people who, put it this way, historians have a word for people in 1930s Germany who voted for the Nazis. These people weren't necessarily important, in support of all the party's objectives, but historians have a special word for these guys who voted because of inflation concerns, or voted because they had a problem with immigrants, or voted because they had a problem with certain religions. Historians still call those people Nazis. Okay. If you sit down and eat with Nazis, you are now a Nazi. If you go to a bar that accepts Nazis, you are in a Nazi bar. All right. I know I've said the N word here like 20 times on this live stream, which means that the algorithm is going to not play this. But guys, that's how I feel, and I'm not going to apologize for that. So let me see. Are there enough jobs for all of those people with the rise of automation AI? Do you think those jobs will come back? Some of them are not coming back. Like I've been able to witness firsthand a lot of mid-level or entry-level software developers getting let go and their jobs being replaced by AI. But it's not just software developers, technical writers, video editors, illustrators. All these guys are having their jobs being replaced by AI. And everyone right now who thinks that using AI tools is going to be the way to there's not even that much room for a lot of people who are basically AI prompt engineers. Like I knew that AI prompt engineer was going to become like an actual job description. This is going to be a very short-term job description, guys, a very short-term job description. I really didn't want AI to do all of my creative writing and creative thinking and art for me. I wanted it to cook for me and mow my lawn. Okay. So it's just like the things that I don't want it to do, that's what I want AI to do. I would be happy building boats in my backyard, which by the way, guys, I did finish my boat. I need to post a picture of that at some point. I did finish my boat. I've taken it out a few times, but I haven't gone out on it that much. But I don't think a lot of those jobs are coming back. But the other thing is there are just a lot of people who are finding it very hard to find a job right now, largely because a lot of the jobs being posted just aren't real. They're posted for internal candidates. They're never really going to interview people with the intention of hiring them. But I'm seeing people right now it was 4 or 5 rounds of interviews. Sometimes it's 6 or 7. They're still getting ghosted. They're not finding jobs for a year and a half. It's particularly bad if you are highly paid and over the age of 45 or 50. It's really, really bad. If you lose your job this time around, you're over 50 and you're in tech, don't expect to find a job making the same amount of money. Just don't expect to find that. Find another path. So, in 2017, when I got fired from my job, which I'm still under a NDA, so I can't really talk about it, but I will say that I had a feeling that my job was going to be replaced by AI anyway in the future. I pulled the trigger a little bit early and started buying businesses that could not be replaced with AI, right? The Jiu-Jitsu Academy, the bar, those kind of things couldn't be replaced with AI. So I've kind of been preparing this for a long time. Automation tools that I was looking at back in that time period, they weren't terribly sophisticated, but they were enough to put a lot of people all out of work even then. So I'd say you're a great man for a pub quiz. Yeah, I'm really good at those trivia games because I have tons of absolutely useless knowledge that I can only show off in a pub quiz or on a live stream. You guys can ask me some weird, obscure things, and I've probably read something about it at some point. So, Don Caesar Shadem, I don't like Nazis. That should be a given, but anytime you want to put that on my live stream, I'm happy to highlight those comments. Doesn't SpaceX have an advantage on price? They probably have an advantage on price for launches that are done for the private sector, but for anything that's done for the government, I can almost guarantee you that there's no savings there whatsoever. They could be doing a lot cheaper. Like, you go into the business of providing things for the government because you know you can rip the government off, right? Particularly because of the way they structure contracts. A lot of times when you're bidding on a contract, there's only 3 or 4 other people bidding for that contract. You probably know all of those other 3 or 4 people. Some of those contracts are set aside for veterans, disabled veterans, minority-owned businesses, female-owned businesses. So they're going to be the only bidder on those contracts sometimes, and they can wildly overbid. I know several people that provide the weirdest, wildest, most mundane things to the government. They're the only bidders on a contract. Sometimes they're going out there. I'm really thinking about one lady that I know who provides basically like holsters, belts, tactical equipment to different law enforcement agencies, federal law enforcement agencies. She just goes online, buys them for $25 a piece off of Amazon, and sells them for like $95 a piece back to the government. That's all she does. And she's been doing this for years because, yes, that's kind of the thing. So if you look, if you are the only company bidding on contracts to launch government satellites, what could you have asked to charge for that? So competition is going to increase for SpaceX as more and more companies get into the private space business. And if you have noticed, I don't know if you noticed or not, but Ukraine is in talks right now with several different European firms to replace Starlink because it's rumored, although Elon Musk denied these rumors, that that Ukraine was threatened that Starlink would be cut off and their war machine would be crippled. Their control of their drone fleets would absolutely be crippled. They would have to go to fiber optics, and there's no way they could produce enough fiber optic drones to actually do what they're doing right now without Starlink. Ukraine is not paying for Starlink, by the way. It's Poland that's paying for their Starlink, something like $20 million a month for their Starlink. But they're in talks with another company right now, a European company, to replace that. He's already cut off Starlink over Crimea and a couple of places right in the middle of operations where a large portion of the Crimean fleet, or sorry, the Black Sea fleet probably would have been sunk in port. He cut off Starlink, and this is early in the war, and I think that was absolutely criminal. It's basically a private citizen running military interference for a U.S. adversary. So, yes, as a Canadian, I want AI to shovel my snow. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know what that terrifying white stuff is. I live in Southern California. I've seen it up on mountains as I drive around, but I haven't seen it in person probably in 20 years. I cannot stand snow. It's fine to go skiing for an afternoon, but I don't want to live anywhere near where it actually snows. Yeah. Yeah. So wondering when these so-called tech people will unionize. All right. This is the conversation that everyone needs to have. I've made this point. Actually, I don't know if I've made this point in videos or not. I've been thinking about this for a long time. In the United States, we really don't have the different classes that we think. There is no middle class. We don't have a lower middle class, a middle class, an upper middle class. Basically, what we have are, and we don't even have like a petite bourgeoisie, like Marxists always talk about, like shop owners or anything like that. What we really have is just the working class and the capitalist class. And the capitalist class own all of the assets and can do whatever they want and buy whatever justice they need, right? We because for the longest period of time, they saw a return in treating workers well. That worked for a long period of time. Post World War II, we had a labor shortage. All the way up until like the 1990s or so, we had a labor shortage in this country. And we still have a labor shortage in certain places, but gradually, little by little, working conditions have gone from 40 hours a week to 60, 70, 80 hours a week for people. And pay has not kept up with inflation. And all of that has to do with the fact that people made, or basically the oligarchs made unions a dirty word. They even made class consciousness a dirty word. So the idea that, the tech worker who makes $300,000 a year is somehow better than the guy who flips hamburgers, that's BS. Because at any point, your life can be turned upside down when your employer decides to stop paying you. It says, hey, I need to call you in for a meeting. You're now fired, right? You're no better. And I got to see this firsthand in 2008 where literally, and I'm seeing this firsthand now where guys that were making $200,000 a year ago are now driving for Uber and probably scratching out $12 to $20 an hour, right? So I've gotten to see this firsthand. And so I am wondering when the working class across all industries is going to get unionized. The reason that government workers have better pay and benefits is because they have unions and they fought for it. And they bought influence with politicians and got themselves better wages. Like I remember talking, this is probably 10 years ago, to a lady who was retiring from the city of San Diego with like $190,000 a year pension and almost $2 million in her deferred compensation plan, talking about as an accountant, she would have gotten paid more in the private sector. She basically just worked as an accountant for the city, kind of worked her way up to that top pay grade and then retired. At no point was she in a position of great responsibility or management over a large group of people or anything like that. She just worked her way up the pay scale. And then she retired with a pension of close to 100% of her pay because San Diego allowed people back then to buy years of service into the pension plan, which is an incredibly dumb idea when women are living to be like 85, 90 years old. This is a really dumb idea. We can't afford to do this. And the plan has changed since then. But she was insistent that she would have made more in the private sector. At that time, this is a long time ago, average earnings for a CPA was only $65,000 a year, and she was making like $165,000. And based on the type of accounting she was doing and the level she never would have made more in the private sector than she was making for the government. But the only way she was, and I was jealous of her benefits and her pay, but then I realized she got what the union fought for, right? The only reason that private sector pay, has not kept up with government pay is because we have not united as a class and demanded better pay. Really, if you look at particularly what's happened since 2001, and again in 2015, 16, there was changes in regulations when it came to like stock buybacks. When you look at what companies have done with the massive profits that they've been able to realize with the reduction in corporate taxes, they didn't pay their workers more. They rewarded their shareholders by doing stock buybacks and increasing and by not diluting the shares, they bought their doing the reverse of dilution. Sorry, I'm stuttering a little bit here. But they did stock buybacks and basically increased shareholder equity. They have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders to do things like this. They don't have a duty to pay out their workers. All they get for paying out their workers is a tax deduction. If I pay a wage to someone, I get to reduce my corporate income by the amount of wage that I paid on a one-to-one basis, right? When they increase shareholder equity, everyone who owns shares gets an increase in the share value, and you only pay capital gains tax on that, right? When you eventually go to dispose of that, or you never really pay capital gains tax on that, you just put that in an account. You borrow against it using margin, and then you only pay the interest on the margin, and you're never taxed on those gains. When you die, your children get when you die, As a billionaire, do you feel part of the working class or capitalist class? I am most certainly not a billionaire. Okay. Most certainly not a billionaire. That's funny. But no, when you do that, let's say you retire from company X, and company X, over that time period, you've amassed $50 million in assets. So you go and you borrow $25 million off of those assets. You live off of that $25 million. You only pay the interest on that $25 million, right? When you die, whatever that stock is worth, let's say that stock went up to $100 million, your descendants will inherit the tax basis of $100 million, not the $50 million that you acquired it for. They're going to inherit that tax basis of $100 million. So they don't owe any taxes on that $50 million of gains. They can liquidate half of that, pay off the margin debt, and basically no income tax and no capital gains tax was ever paid on those funds. This is how rich people are basically screwing everyone over and not paying their fair share. Okay. Look, this is what I mean, if I get to that level of wealth, this is what I plan on doing for my kids. I'll take my couple $1 million in assets. I'll put it into a brokerage account. I'll borrow out half of it in terms of margin. I'll live off of that loan that I got, pay the interest on it over time. When I die, my kids inherit those assets that have gone up in value. If they sell it right away, they're not going to pay any taxes on it at all, none whatsoever, and they can pay off that loan, and no one will have ever paid taxes on that because you get a step up in cost basis, right? That is just a fact of law. The law favors the wealthy. The law favors the investment class. You don't have to be that wealthy to enjoy these benefits, but the first thing we should have gotten rid of is the interest income deduction. Also, the interest that I pay on that margin loan is going to be tax deductible, right? Now, there needs to be some sort of investment interest that is tax deductible for businesses that are using it to expand operations and employ more people, but there should be a lower limit. There is no limitation on it today. There should be a limitation on it going forward. And there's a lot of ways to get around it by hiding the money in different businesses. But this is the way that rich people never, ever pay taxes on what they have. Only when they're forced to sell things because of a tax bill are they actually going to pay, actually going to pay. Like, this is how you hide wealth. And all of these billionaires are doing this. Warren Buffett has been talking about this for years, that he pays less in taxes than his secretary does. Of course, he has a secretary who at the time was on the 35% tax bracket, which meant she was earning over like $450,000 a year, which is a very well-paid secretary. I'm sure he or she does a great job, but he was paying less in taxes than she was because of how the tax code is set up. This has got to end. We don't just have a spending problem in the United States. We do. I've seen this on left-wing social media, which I see less of. People are saying we don't have a spending problem, we have an income problem. No, we have both a spending problem and we have an income problem. We need to raise taxes and cut spending as well. And we can meet in the middle, raise taxes by $1 trillion a year, cut spending by $1 trillion a year. And the largest chunk of that spending could come out of the military budget. The largest chunk of that spending could come out of the military budget. I don't think that we need to cut veterans benefits. I do think that we need to have a really, really serious conversation about what we're going to do about Social Security. Social Security is apart from, paying for the operations of the government. That is supported by the payroll tax. You pay 6.2% on your paycheck for payroll taxes to support your Social Security benefit. Your employer pays 6.2%. So a total of 12.4% of what you earn is going into Social Security. That all works great as long as there are more people working than there are people retired. When Social Security was conceived, that was always true because life expectancy was so low. You could collect Social Security at 65, or you could collect Social Security at 65, but male life expectancy was 61 and there was no survivor's benefit. So then they added a survivor's benefit. Then they added a spousal benefit. For spouses that don't work, they can collect half of the primary insurance payer, the primary worker's insurance benefit until he dies, and then they can collect his benefit. Then they added children's benefits over the years without really changing how much we're paying into the system. That all worked as long as there were more people working than there were people who were collecting benefits. This is the problem now, is that the baby boomer generation is really, really large. People have been screaming about this for 40 years, saying we must do something about Social Security. By 2031, Social Security will be insolvent. We can pay indefinitely about 70% on the dollar of benefits that we have today, about 70%. If we want to pay 100% of the benefit, we either have to raise taxes or we have to cut the benefit, right? We need to raise taxes and cut the benefit. I'm all in favor of cutting the benefit just because the math doesn't work out for life expectancy. We went from 61 for males to 78. We went from not providing for non-working spouses to now women are living to be 80 years old. There are just too many people surviving for us to pay the benefits that we promised. And I'm sorry, but you were never contributing to an account that was set aside for you. You were always paying for a worker that was currently retired. When you are working, your Social Security benefits were going to pay for a retired person. When you retire, you're not using your account. Somebody who's still working behind you and younger than you is paying for your benefit. This, by definition, like, we have to change this. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm still laughing at this billionaire comment. I'm not a billionaire. I wish I was. I keep taking my money out of the stock market and starting new businesses, and some of those are successful and some of those fail. So, and let me see here. So I know a guy that does roofing for the Army, and when the annual budget is coming to end, he gets asked to submit invoices so they can maintain their budget. That's common, because if you have money left over, next year your budget's going to get cut, right? And we're not providing these senior enlisted guys and junior officers the tools they need to do the right thing. We're punishing them for not spending. We're punishing them for not spending their money by cutting their budget. We need to do something about that. So, I feel like the current system of employment may be an inflection point because the working class does not have any leverage anymore. Yeah, we need to organize and strike. Organize and strike. Although I have 35 to 40 employees total. I'm not really sure exactly how many I have, largely because that one of my businesses, it changes so much. Most of them are not aware that they actually work for me, but I kind of estimated that the total amount of payroll taxes that I paid last year was close to $90,000 on their wages. So, which means that I do not have a ton of tremendously highly paid employees. And a lot of that is because of the bar. A lot of those employees are part-time. They actually have full-time employment elsewhere, and they work in my bar part-time. But I'm paying a lot in terms of payroll taxes, a lot in terms of labor expenses because of how high minimum wages here and how that's pushed up service sector jobs all over. I don't begrudge these people the money. You have to earn a lot in where I live, or you're just not going to make it, right? And that's the thing you can see in San Diego. San Diego has always had a homeless problem because people move out here because it's beautiful. People move out here because the weather's great. People move out here for the California dream. And then they realize you got to work your ass off to stay out here. You just have to work your ass off to stay out here. And just a few months of bad luck, and you can end up homeless if you don't have a support system. So let me see, Jack. Yeah, we talked about that. Just wanted to highlight that face here. Do you support the crypto reserve? I don't, because it's just going to lead to government manipulation of cryptocurrency. I don't want to see increased regulation of cryptocurrency. I actually kind of want this to be the wild, wild west. I want to see how this new asset class is going to develop. It's still new. And yeah, I don't want to see a crypto reserve. And I'm not sure about the sovereign wealth fund. If we had a sovereign wealth fund like Norway had, or like Saudi Arabia had, I would say that's a pretty good idea. But, I have not invested in some companies because of a sovereign wealth fund being the primary beneficiary of those companies, right? So, and I think that might happen as well. The White House releases videos of Trump's guests and freed Israeli hostages, thanking him in the past 24 hours. The White House produced videos from media platforms in which people thank Trump. Yeah, I may have missed some context there because I'm not sure Not sure why you're posting that, but I may have missed some context there. Or maybe I talked about it. So yeah, I remember how long it's been. I remember we talked about Algorand at some point at the time. Do you still hold that crypto? I don't, largely because I needed the funds for something else. It crashed, and then it went back up a little bit. I was like, well, I need money for another project, so I'm going to use that. So I don't have Algorand. Algorand, honestly, in terms of its white papers, in terms of its community, it was one of the best cryptocurrencies out there. It was just never able to gain any traction, and I haven't even checked the price in quite some time. Bitcoin has major problems in use, right? It's very difficult to use Bitcoin because of how long it takes to push through transactions. It's just not done instantly. I think that Ethereum and things built on the Ethereum blockchain would be a better way to go. And I also think that their proof of stake. So proof of work has problems and proof of stake has problems as well. Proof of stake is basically going to cause concentration of wealth in the people who already have wealth. And basically meaning that if you're able to stake more crypto, then you're going to make more crypto. And I think that this is just going to lead to wealth concentration problems later on down the road. I'm sick of wealth concentration. I think this country worked a lot better when a lot more people were able to afford living. I am worried at this point that people cannot afford to frequent the businesses that I own. I was running some numbers on what I charge and what percentage of median income it is for my area. And I'm at the limit of what basically people spend about 2% of their median income per hobby, right? If you got 4 hobbies, you're probably spending 8% of your median income on that hobby. If you have 1 hobby, you're probably spending about 2% of your median income on that hobby, right? I'm kind of at that limit with what I charge for my businesses right now. And fewer and fewer people are able to afford that because more people are stacking, because median just means like the middle. Like, so, 50% of people are below this number. And let's put it this way. The businesses that I own all cater to the working class, and the working class is not getting wealthier in this type of environment. And it all has to do with our tax code. Pitchfork manufacturer. This is America. We have Second Amendment pitchforks. And honestly, this is what billionaires need to worry about. They don't need to worry about, 1776. Let's free ourselves from Democrats or whatever. What they really need to worry about is France 1793, if you know what I'm talking about. There's about 80 people on my list that I think that America can do without. And there's only 2 of those people on that list that I think should still be around when this is all over. But yeah, no, I think that the Republican Party is playing a very dangerous game right now. A very dangerous game. They need to remember they have protected the Second Amendment for a long time, and lots of people who don't like them are also Second Amendment supporters. The thing that I think is blowing me away, though, is Nebraska's response right now to what is going on to this. This state is 2 quarters away from being bankrupt. They don't have the tax revenue to support what's going on right now because of, they gave $1 billion tax cut to billionaires in the state of Nebraska. And basically they counted on COVID-19 pandemic relief funds to make up that shortfall. And then when those funds ended, they never readjusted their tax code to go back to collecting taxes. And now with the Trump administration delaying payouts to farmers for a number of different things, they're in big trouble. And with a large part of their workforce just skedaddling and getting out of the state because they don't want to get deported, they are in a lot of trouble at this point. So do you know anything about Aurora Innovation? Actually, I don't know anything about Aurora Innovation. That's something I'll probably take a look at. It's usually when people mention things on my live stream or in my Patreon, that's usually when I go and I check those things out. Like Annie just asked about a couple of different companies. And then I actually answered a question that was about Axon on my Patreon group as well. Axon is a company that you guys should be looking at. I think there's an opportunity here in the near future. I know they've already gone down by about $100 a share or so. The big thing to look out for Axon is how what sectors of their business are growing, and these are high margin sectors. And that's all I really want to say on this live stream right now. Largely because I'm releasing some of my thoughts just on my Patreon right now, and I want to maintain value for that. So, actually, you had a question today about your. I saw this on one of the videos I watched. I like about your severance package. If you work for a private sector company, there's no guarantee that you're going to receive those funds in a severance package based on years of service. They're able to change those severance packages. If you live in the United States, they're able to change those severance packages pretty much at will and not deliver that to you. Like the Twitter folks are still waiting to get paid on the severance package that they were supposed to get paid on, and they're never going to get paid. They're going to keep these people tied up in court until they give up. So, do you believe all the talk by Trump about deregulation creating a business-friendly environment? Sort of. I think what they're mostly going to get rid of is environmental restrictions. And I don't want to get rid of environmental restrictions. What a lot of people who don't live in California don't realize about California is that roughly half the land here is federally owned. It's completely wild. If you can walk far enough, you can get far away from people and not seeing a single person. We have mountain ranges where there is nobody. We have desert areas where there's nobody. We have just incredible nature here. I do not want to see that deregulated. I don't want to see it exploited. I love it the way it is. We have really liberal, in federal spaces, you have really liberal gun regulations. You can go hunting pretty much anything that's within season. You go hunting. You can gather rocks, minerals, all on your own. You can just explore. We have tons of Native American ruins here in the American Southwest that are located on federal lands that would probably absolutely get destroyed by commercial operations, probably commercial mining operations, if some of those regulations were done away with, if environmental impact studies weren't done. I do think that when it comes to housing in particular, we need to loosen the rules on environmental impact, and we need to absolutely get more housing. So, but I do think that we need to deregulate, particularly at the state level. California needs to deregulate the restrictions on building housing, and we need to get rid of the whole NIMBY mindset, the not in my backyard mindset. But environmental restrictions are the one thing they're going to go after. And I've been to countries where they don't have a lot of things here. Here we go. Oh my God, dude. Dumbest thing I've heard of so far. The most ridiculously stupid thing I've ever heard of so far. I will personally deface that if it's done. Personally. And if I say what I wanted to say right now, I would be on an FBI watch list. So, interested in your thoughts on professional sport. Do you believe they should be paid the ridiculous amounts that they are getting? It seems out of step with the average Joe. Should they? So, sports figures are actually the best example of a unified workforce that understands that they are the working class. They have unions that represent them. They have agents that represent them, that negotiate with companies. They produce, particularly these sports heroes, produce the value. They make the sports watchable, right? Steph Curry, I don't know how many eyes he brings on to. I don't actually know that much about basketball. My son's a basketball fan, but I'm just bringing up Steph Curry because he's the first person that I could think of. But he brings tons of eyes to television. A lot of people want to advertise on games where he plays because they know tons of people are watching it. A lot of people show up to stadiums or basketball arenas just to watch him. He's producing a lot of economic benefit, and he's able to use the power of the union and the power of his agents who represent him to negotiate those really large salaries, right? So if this was like the 1930s or 40s or 50s, where they didn't have giant television contracts and they really got paid based on how many people they're bringing into stadiums, like my grandfather was good friends with Johnny Unitas. Now, Johnny died before I was born, but my mom remembered him coming to visit. But Johnny Unitas, based on the descriptions I heard, he was not a wealthy person once he retired. He had a small pension from the NFL and, a couple of rental properties, but he lived a really like modest life. But he had absolutely been destroyed. The man could barely walk, based on his time in the NFL. Professional athletes are going to dedicate a huge portion of their life to a career that's very short, and then most of them will have almost no earning power once they're done with that sport. Somebody like Shaq, who's way more intelligent than he wants people to think he is, who's been able to invest in businesses, and he's worth way more after he retired than he was while he was actually working. He's going to do well, but there are for every one Shaq, there are dozens of nameless players you've never heard of who only have 6 or 8 year careers who, after that's done, their bodies are destroyed and they don't really have a way to earn money. They don't really have any other skills. So if I were a professional athlete and, the company that I worked for had billions of dollars in television contracts, I would want a portion of the wealth that my labor is producing. So I don't begrudge athletes for making millions and millions of dollars. The eyes on them are what justify the millions that they're making, because it's all about it's all about the advertising that they're selling. So I definitely don't begrudge that. The people that I begrudge making money are managers, man. So I'm kind of being facetious here. I've had a couple of really good managers in my lifetime, and I've had tons of managers that are absolutely worthless. But yeah, pitchforks, and then Oog Nwachuk, I've never learned how to pronounce your name. Says ammo. Yeah. I have an unreasonable amount of ammo. I'm going to admit that I've got a problem. I've got an unreasonable. There's no way in my lifetime that I can use the amount of ammo that I have now. I don't know why I keep so much around. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It makes zero sense whatsoever. So, yeah. But I hopefully I never have to be thankful that I made that investment. Hopefully. Yeah. So back to this Mount Rushmore. Is this actually a directive to the Secretary of Interior to arrange the carving the figure of Donald Trump on Mount Rushmore? Is this real? HR 792. I got to look this up. It's real. It's real. This was of course, it was submitted by Representative Anna Paulina Luna, who is a conspiracy loon, by the way. So you guys probably may not know this, but I've been interested in UFOs since I was about 8 years old. I've never experienced anything like this myself. I just read a book that made an impression when I was a kid, and have really got into the work of a historian that I can't remember the name of right now. Richard something or other's name, but he wrote a book called UFOs in the National Security State, where he really exposed how deep the U.S. involvement in this has been, and how the government has taken this seriously for a long time, and how the projects studying UAP were pushed underground a long time ago into the black somewhere a long time ago. This lady right now is a conspiracy loon. She is the one who's responsible for looking at, she's part of what's called the UAP Congress, or the UAP, basically a group of people investing in UAPs. The Democrats that are involved in this UAP group are relatively normal individuals who have a bit of gravitas, and you can take them seriously. The Republicans on this side are loons, dude. Anna Paulina Luna is a conspiracy nut. Tim Burchett is a conspiracy nut. Jared Moskowitz, on the other hand, sounds reasonable. But the other people involved are like, they literally put the looniest people in Congress in charge of investigating something that deserves real scientific attention. that deserves disclosure of what we actually know about this. They put the loonies people in charge of it, basically to discredit the entire thing, I think. So, and Representative Anna Paulina Luna, she has done absolutely nothing good in Congress since the day she was elected. She's going to get a lot of press time in the next couple of years because she is an absolute nut. If this goes through, I will be one of thousands of people that defaces this. Thousands of people. And I have a really good method of making sure it's complete too. But like I said, if I talked about that, yes. Ammo is a good market. Ammo is a good investment if you could sell on the open market. The percent gain would be more than gold. Well, it depends on where you are. Yes. In the United States, it's only like, I don't know why ammunition is so high priced in the United States. It doesn't cost that much to make it. And yeah, we have high demand, but we have a huge amount of producers of ammunition. So I don't know why it costs so much. And especially in California, because there are restrictions on lead. Like I think it's still illegal to use anything but steel shot in California for bird hunting, but I tend to use steel core shot right now for just a lot of my rifle shooting too, just because it's cheaper to use than lead shot. It's less accurate. And I swear it feels different. But I use a lot of that for target shooting at this point. But yeah, but the California's gun laws are quite annoying. They're quite annoying. And luckily I have a few items that have escaped notice by laws written in California because the people writing the laws don't really know guns that well. So they haven't been able to accurately describe some of the things that I have and make them illegal. And they haven't really been consulting experts in the industry to do so. So some of what I have has actually escaped notice. Yeah. So back to markets, guys, here for a moment. I know I kind of got off on a tangent. If you have any other tangents that you want to talk about, let me know. Back to markets. We had a good day in the market today. The last couple of weeks has been very bad. Right now, almost in any case, the day-to-day movement on the market is driven by emotion, by the emotions of the people trading, whether that's retail investors or even institutional investors. The only people that aren't driven by emotion are the algorithms doing the trading, but they're even responding to the emotions of other traders, right? Based on their actions. Over time, though, the market is not driven by emotion. It's driven by the very rational exposition of company profits. As profits decline, or indications that profits are going to decline, you're going to see the stock market decline. It's really about earnings. Right now, the market is going to front run earnings. I'm confused what to do to the market. You're the only one saying sell. I'm not only saying sell, I've got a large amount of my portfolio sitting in cash. In 2020, when I had a large amount of my portfolio sitting in cash, that was by coincidence. Like I literally just had not found anything to invest in, and was sitting on the sidelines waiting for opportunities. And boy, did 2020 provide me a lot of opportunities to invest. This time around, I pulled money out of some investments because they had gotten ridiculously overvalued, and I wanted to repurchase them at a greater value. And this, I'm not talking about some of the growth stocks like SoFi that I like to buy. Some of this was your blue chip stocks that had just reached a point where their price to earnings ratios were way out of whack, and at some point they had to come back down to reality. And in some cases, I'm looking at the type of environment that we're going into, and I think that anything involved with consumer discretionary spending is going to suffer because of a high inflationary environment. And I think that anything that is consumer staple will probably do better. I'm not saying it's not going to suffer. I think that between now and the end of the year, we're going to see a lot of volatility. And it's not going to be obvious that the market is, we're seeing 1.5% moves, 1%, 1.5% moves, not exactly out of the ordinary. But all of the gains that were made after the election of Trump have all been wiped out by this point. And it's because of the uncertainty that he has created. I am not entirely unconvinced that he does not want to deliberately sabotage asset values, increase unemployment so he can bring interest rates down, and then try to do the dumbest thing that I can think of, which is try to renegotiate U.S. debt. The vast majority of U.S. debt is owed to U.S. investors. About $9 trillion of it is owed to foreign investors, with the largest owner of that foreign debt being Japan. They own about $1.1 trillion of foreign debt. The second largest holder of that is China with about $840 billion. And I think Canada is the fourth largest holder of U.S. debt with around, it's either $340 or $240 billion of U.S. debt. All right. One of the things they could do in the event of an increasing trade war is dump their U.S. securities in huge amounts onto the market. Just dump their securities on the market. And so that would actually raise our interest rates here. They could coordinate this with a couple of other countries too, like probably with Mexico. I don't think they hold that much debt, but they hold some. They could coordinate with China if they want to, coordinate with the EU, dump U.S. debt on the open market and jack up our interest rates. The other thing that would do is that would crash their currency, which is not a bad thing, right? It's not a bad thing because it would negate the tariffs on Canadian goods. If their currency crashed by 15 or 20%, it's going to defray the cost of tariffs, right? It's going to make their imports cheaper into the United States. And on the other end, it makes our exports to Canada much more expensive. The other thing they can do is jack up the price of potash. They provide 80% of our potash. The other major suppliers are Russia, Belarus, and China. I don't think we're not going to go to Russia and Belarus for potash, even though we did in the past. Although I don't know, Trump definitely seems to be aligning us with Russia, which I certainly don't approve of. But China can't sell it to us because they need everything they produce for themselves. We have a lot of potash reserves in the ground here. The problem is the form they're in, and who actually owns those reserves right now. It's Canadian companies. We'd actually have to seize those reserves from Canadian companies inside the United States in order to do that. So, So Oog also says that the S&P average PE is higher than it's been in years. Yeah, and this is one of the reasons that I've been pulling out of the market. Its price to earnings ratios have kind of a normal, and it differs based on the industry. Let's say like a tech company is generally like the price to earnings ratio is like 35. They're really, all of them are really, I don't mind owning some that are growing really quickly with price to earnings ratios that are higher than that. But a mature tech company really shouldn't have, like a Google. Somebody said on here that they're buying more Google, but like a Google really shouldn't have a PDE ratio of higher than 35 at this point. Right. And I am, I haven't looked in a couple of days, but I assume that it does. This is one of the reasons I started putting more in cash, because there just wasn't anything in that bucket to buy. And I own a lot of ETFs, they're index ETFs. And so there just wasn't anything to buy at this point. And it was one of the few times in investing where sitting in cash and earning 4% while I looked for stocks that are a good value, or look for ETFs where the PDE ratio wasn't really out of whack, it seemed like a good time. So it isn't as much of a coincidence this time that I have a high degree of cash. It became that way because I got very nervous about high PDE ratios. So I'm sitting in an all cash paid off mortgage, and I have a huge pile of cash, been waiting to deploy. What do you think I should do? I think that you're going to have a lot of opportunities to invest this year, particularly once we see the power of the consumer start to get eroded by inflation. Inflation will not last forever. It will end at some point. Once inflation gets high enough and consumer demand dries up, we're going to see private sector employment start to drop off. When demand drops, inflation is going to drop at that point. Interest rates are going to drop at that point. It's going to seem very bleak. And that's when I'm going to invest. That's when I'm going to buy. This is when I'm going to make my next $1 million, is probably in the next year. I'm just not going to know it for another 4 or 5 years. Okay. You won't know it for another 4 or 5 years. But this year is going to make a lot of new millionaires. They're just not going to find out for 4 or 5 years. Okay. The thing that happens with markets that people don't remember, though, is that markets turn around long before the economy does. So you don't wait till things look good to start investing. You start investing when everyone else is pulling their money out. $1 billion, you mean? I would need triple digit Xing to make it to $1 billion. So yeah, I would need triple digit Xing to make it $1 billion. I'm doing okay, but I need to make a lot more. So I've been buying some unconventional stock at good P&E, like Upwork. So I actually hate Upwork. Using it not as an investment. In this environment, this is actually something I wasn't thinking of, and I should have been. Upwork, it could be a fantastic investment for what's coming next. You're going to see a lot of people, logo or like graphic artists, tech writers, creative people moving to Upwork. You're going to see a lot of that because of unemployment. They're going to, especially once the unemployment runs out, 26 weeks and the unemployment, once it runs out, I think you're going to see a lot of that. The fact that it is the PDE ratio on this is 9.82, earnings per share was $1.52 per share, right? See here, it's gone up quite a bit. I need to take a closer look at their income statement because I haven't looked at this for a while. I would think that you may be in for a run with Upwork. If we see increased unemployment, I think that it's going to look pretty good. Let me see here. And what else were you looking at? Was MTCH Match Group. Is this? What is Match Group? Hold on. Oh, okay. So Tinder, Hinge, Evergreen, Emerging. So I was actually seeing that. I think one of the ones, either Tinder or Hinge or one of those, like missed earnings this week and missed it pretty bad. This is the one I don't know about. Like Upwork, I know about, but I know that there's a lot of dissatisfaction when it comes to these apps at this point, and a lot of people are giving up on them, and their revenue models are kind of suffering at this point. But I didn't realize that their portfolio included Tinder, Hinge, Match, Meetnik, OkCupid, Pairs, Plenty of Fish, Azar, BLK, and other brands. I did not realize that it included all of those brands. I didn't realize that they had been consolidated so much. Not a terrible idea. Let's look at here. Yeah, so the other thing you need to look at here is the value trap phenomenon. Because value investing has been out of fashion for a decade, 2 decades now. The thing you need to watch out for is something called a value trap, meaning that sometimes when a stock goes down and the PDE ratio looks really good, it looks like a good value, it's down for a reason. And I've been reading about some of the statistical challenges that these dating apps are having, and some of the revenue generating challenges these apps are having. So it may be down for a reason. I don't know enough about that stock to actually make that determination, but I would do a bit more research on that. So even layering in DCA weight, yeah, dollar cost averaging would be a great strategy right now. It would be an incredibly good strategy right now. And because you don't know where the bottom is. You don't know how bad it's going to get. You don't even know if it's going to get bad. I think it's going to get bad because of the index of leading economic indicators, the amount of layoffs that we're having, the amount of hidden layoffs that we're having that are really being hidden right now because of deferred compensation plans, because of because of basically like severance agreements and people just not getting their unemployment filings done yet. I think that we're seeing a lot of that. So DCAing pretty much now might not be terrible. We've actually seen a significant decline in the market in the last couple of days. Like if I look at, we're going to look at the S&P 500. The Dow has been down quite a bit more than the S&P, but if I look at the last 6 months or so, it's been relatively flat. But since it's been going down over the last couple of days. It's really just been on tariff news. But remember, the S&P 500 has a lot of like staples in it, and we're seeing a lot of sector rotation. If you look at the NASDAQ here, which is a lot of our tech stocks, and we look at the last 6 months or so, once again, it's been relatively stable, but buoyed, of course, by what's been going on in, since the election. We have that election trade, but basically since the middle of February, it's been declining. It's all been declining since the middle of February. So yeah, I'm pretty concerned about what's been going on over the last 2 weeks, but that's not my real concern. I'm concerned over what goes on in the next couple of months. So MSTR. All right. So we're looking at, oh man, I thought you were talking about Monster. You're talking about MicroStrategy. Lots of people have asked me about MicroStrategy. This is a company that I just don't have an opinion on. It's it's a company that I just don't have an opinion on. And I've read so many conflicting things on here, on there. Yeah. Buying Bitcoin to raise their stock price, bruh. Yeah. And let's remember that Bitcoin now has a bit of, I don't know what Bitcoin is going to do, but it's got some institutional wind in its sails right now with basically this administration manipulating the crypto market for its own benefit. And this is what rich people do, though. They manipulate the price of assets, stocks, real estate, other things for their own thing. So for their own benefit. CLH, let me see. And MicroStrategy holders have almost religious-like devotion to the company too. That's one of the things that I found disturbing about Tesla. And it's one of the things that I found disturbing about MicroStrategy too. But honestly, I don't really have that much of an opinion on them because their actual business has not interested me in years. So Celsius Holdings, who actually owns Monster Software Drink now? Is it Celsius Holdings? So here's the thing. If we are going to war, you want to be invested in energy drinks. If the United States is going to war, you want to be invested in energy drinks. I do not think you guys quite understand, because I live in a military town. Like this is a military town, right? There's something like 400 USAA. When I worked for them years ago, they did a survey, something like 477,000 people in San Diego County, which is like a third of the population, was either active duty or retired military, right? So that was like a third of the people back when they did that survey. So there's tons of military people. I don't think you understand the degree to which young men in the military drink energy drinks. I just don't think you understand that. If we go to war, Celsius and Monster Energy Drink, whoever owns Monster, they are going to make a fortune, an absolute fortune. The military runs on spite and energy drinks. That's it. I think that it would be a great investment if we are actually going to go to war. So based off Twitter, people are over dating apps. Also, people don't have the money to date right now. If I lived my life based on what I saw on social media alone, it would seem like men and women are at war with each other and no one actually wants to date because they hate each other. I just can't believe that is actually true, right? I believe that if you're putting yourself on a marketplace where your only way to make that initial impression on somebody is with a picture, and you're not an extremely good looking dude, you're just setting yourself up for failure, right? Like you like the proportion of like when you go out into the wild and you approach women, and remember, I had to do this on the days where we had to find them first. Like we didn't have apps where we could find them. You had to just like wander around from place to place until you found them. But your hit rate was something like 2%. So for every 98 women that you talked to, only 2 of them were interested in going out on a date with you. So you just had to get used to getting rejected over and over and over and over and over again, right? So it didn't make sense to me to get upset over being rejected or what, but like that is going to be magnified when people don't get to meet you in person and the only thing they see is a picture. And there's so many different ways that ladies can get the ick with you and just be turned off instantly by looking at a photo at you. Like it's just so much better to meet people in person and get rejected in person. And especially if you take rejection well, then like if you take rejection well, then That's actually in ways I think it's gonna help you out a lot. So, but you guys should try it. If you guys are younger, try it. And like I said, I met my wife the old-fashioned way in person. We started dating long before I thought internet dating was a thing, although it was something already. Yeah. Ontario may slap a 25% export tariff on their electricity. It's funny that the very thing Trump is threatening Canada with would be used to hurt the USA. Yeah, you know what's funny is Americans don't realize that their electricity prices are going up anyway, and they're going up anyway just because of economics. Because of the war in Ukraine, they're going to go up. There are 23 or 33 different LNG export facilities that are under construction in the United States right now, and something like 38 receiving facilities that are under construction right now in Europe to replace the pipeline infrastructure that was coming from Russia, which means that we're going to be exporting a lot more liquid natural gas. The only reason why liquid natural gas or natural gas rather was so cheap in the United States for the last 30 years is because we didn't have anywhere to sell it. We only had our own company to sell for. We have massive amounts of it, but we didn't really have a way to export it, right? We weren't building pipelines all the way across the ocean and had to be liquefied and shipped in giant ships. And there weren't a lot of places that would take liquefied natural gas, right? There weren't a lot of ports that would take that. That's all changed now with the war in Ukraine. Europe does not want to be dependent on a single energy provider. They're going to be buying liquid natural gas from the United States. They're going to be buying it from Canada. They're going to be buying it from the Middle East. They're going to be buying it from countries in North Africa. They're going to diversify their supply, right? Which means that supplies are actually, we're probably not going to drill more to find more natural gas. We already produce more than we need. The price is going to go up just because more of that is going to be exported. So electricity prices in the US are going up anyway. They're absolutely going to go up anyway. I think the places they're going to go up the most are actually places like Texas, where you already have liquid natural gas export facilities, and they're already a huge exporter, a huge producer of natural gas. I think you're going to see a lot of increases there. So, yeah, you're so right. Look at the insane monster rise after the Iraq War announcement. Yeah, it's like I've observed this effect with energy drinks in the military for the longest time, and yeah. My friend is a serial online dater, so I have first-hand experience with apps. That's my market research. Plus, a negative sentiment might be a good opportunity. Yeah, I just don't know with that. Like I said, I wasn't aware that one company owned all of those different dating apps. I was not aware of that because that's not something that I follow. I have been interested in. I've looked at some of the data from that because so a lot of their data in terms of like their demographics, who's getting swiped and who's not. A lot of that's released publicly. It's stripped of any identifying information, but they sell that data and then it's released publicly so people can do research on it. And I have looked at some of that because I'm interested in the mating habits of humans and why it seems to be so complex. And I've taken a look at that data and it doesn't look good. Like if you are not if you're not like a great looking dude, then just stay off the apps. Just do something else. So yeah. I'm not even going to try and pronounce your name. I'm going to assume that it said you are actually from Quebec and you live in Massachusetts now on a NAFTA work visa. Yeah, I'm wondering how that's going to work. Yeah, love Quebec. Outside of Montreal and Quebec City, it's very hard to understand the French in some of the backcountry areas. So, yeah. And Chris Palmer says, "Be wary of girls with only headshots, fellas." You know what, man? They can do some. I've seen some weird like camera angle magic that people can do. Like it's insane what people can do. I am so glad that I got married and happily married before any of this ever happened to me. Because I'm just the wrong kind of person. The wrong kind of person to do that anyway. I would probably never get swiped on, but not even that. If I got deceived into meeting someone like that, like I don't think. I would probably be one of those people that didn't respond well to that. So yeah. So anyway, guys, keep the questions coming if you're going to keep them coming. If not, let me see if I missed something here. Oog says, take a look at CRCK. Nope, nothing for that. I don't know if you guys are. Remember, I can't tell if you guys are joking sometimes. Meritage Homes Corporation. Meritage Homes Corporation. Let's see what they do here. Is this a design, build single family and detached homes in the United States? Operates in 2 seconds. Home building and financial services. So I don't know if you watched the video that I put out today, but there was one organization, one like real estate watch. Sorry, yeah. What that leads me into something now. There was one organization that put out an estimate that the U.S. real estate market was overvalued by as much as 35%. If we see, and we're seeing inventories rise in markets like Dallas and Miami right now, like super, super high. And I can't really tell, but it looks like we're seeing price declines. Real estate TikTok people are saying that we're seeing price declines there, but don't really trust them. So I kind of looked up that information myself. And I was able to see in Washington, D.C. area, of course, that we are seeing the market being flooded with houses being sold. And we are seeing the market being flooded in Miami with houses and properties being sold, and also Dallas as well. And we're seeing a reversal in the trend of people sort of like moving away from the Austin area. So that we're kind of seeing that right now. And futures are down. I kind of figured they would be. I don't know what the market is going to do tomorrow. Futures is not always the best indication of what's going on. If you were a betting man, what price would SoFi reach by 2030? I'm going to say it's very reasonable that SoFi reaches $100 a share by 2030. If I'm that's only 5 years from now. Hold on, $75 a share by 2030. I'm going to say it's possible to reach that. It's going to touch $10 a share and less before it reaches that 75 by 2030. They're in the short term, their earnings are still going to grow. And they've got a massive opportunity to make a lot of money when interest rates drop and people start refinancing their personal credit card debt and personal loans. By that time, a lot of the bad risks are already going to be shaken out because they lost their jobs or they already defaulted on payments. So the people that do apply are generally going to have higher credit ratings, more stable jobs in more stable industries. They're going to be able to absolutely clean up in terms of debt refinancing. But that's like maybe 2 years out. That's like a second wave type of investment in the downturn that I think we're going to see. So I think that SoFi will probably get below 10 at some point before that happens. What I plan to do in that case is if SoFi hits $10 a share, $8 a share, I'm going to buy Leaps with a $4 strike price and a 2-year expiration. I'll buy deep in the money Leaps, or those are deep in the money calls with a long expiration, which means that I'm going to get 100 shares of participation in the upward side of that market, but at a fraction of the cost, at like 45% of the cost of 100 shares. So I am going to, so that's probably what I'm going to do. That's what I did the last time around is in 2020 is I bought Leaps on a lot of really boring stocks like Microsoft and Johnson & Johnson and all that stuff, like, a year and a half, 2 years out. So, let's say I'm just going to use an example here. Let's say I wanted to buy a Leap on SoFi. Let's say the price is $10 a share. I buy a strike price at $5. I'm probably going to pay like $2,000 for that. So what I'm risking is $2,000, right? And there's intrinsic value to it, but then there's a little bit with like the theta and the time decay and all that. So let's say it's worth like $2,000. So I paid $2,000 for that. As we get closer to that date, if you're still over the strike price, the value of that starts to grow. And especially if it grows beyond that $10 point where you bought it, you're going to get dollar for dollar, at least maybe more participation in the upside of the market. And then you only risk $2,000, right? But the trick is you probably have to hold that for a year and a half before you ever get rid of it. Okay. So Dan, he's going for options as a long-term investor. I've bought options as a long-term investor, but remember, I'm buying deep in the money calls, right? There's very little chance that it's going to go below the strike price entirely, right? And I'm only risking a fraction of what I would risk by buying the stock itself, right? So typically, if it goes up really quickly in the short term, I'm probably going to sell it, right? I'll just sell the option itself. But generally, if it's way above the market price, right? I mean, if it's way above the strike price, there is no market for that option anymore. If it's like so far above the strike price, let's say if I bought it at a $5 strike price and it goes up to like $45 or something like that, there's no actual market for that option anymore. So I'll just exercise that option and I'll just keep the shares. I'll just keep the shares. That's all I'm going to do. And then I'll probably sell, I'll probably at that point, if it's up at $45 a share, I'll probably sell way out of the money calls on that to generate some income as well, hoping never to sell it. Right. That's pretty much what I did with SoFi and with Tesla. I was selling calls that were so far out of the money that I was generating, less than 0.25% a month on the options that I was selling, but it was just a little bit of income to keep coming in, and I never had to sell those. The stock where that strategy backfired was Nvidia. I just was never able to price. I was never able to price Nvidia in a way where they didn't blow through the options, and I was forced to sell it, and then I was forced to pay taxes on the gains, right? Which I don't want to do that. So yeah. Leaps are hard to time on SoFi, but I rolled it over. Man, I think I only failed on one leap that I bought. And that's because I bought it because I didn't go deep enough into the money and get them 2 years out. Like if you're going to buy leaps, just go as far out. You can get them for about 2.5 years out. Go as far out as you can. Just go as far out as you can. That's it. And as deep in the money as you can stand. Right. So yeah, damn, he's going for options as a long-term investor. This is serious. I think the opportunity to invest is going to be enormous here because I think just like what happened in the first downturn in the stock market in 2020, it was just utter panic. I think the same thing is going to happen because we just don't have enough people in the market right now who've already experienced a bad market. We got a lot of newer investors, and I think you're going to see the herd start to run in the younger investors who get nervous or people who just think they can time the market. That's when the herd's going to start to run. Then the algorithms are going to respond to the herd running, and then the professional traders are going to be behind them. I actually think they're going to be behind the curve this time around. They're still going to be, remember, professional traders and algorithms are still going to be invested. They're just going to be rotating sectors, right? Oog says, thank you for the gains. Chris says, my average price is $460 with 10,000 shares. Diamond handing this. Oh, hell yeah. I'd love to hear about people winning, man. That's pretty cool, man. Chris, you've been a long time subscriber. Thanks for supporting. And Pat Mulligan, I didn't realize so many of you guys actually were trading options. Seems like a lot of you guys are trading options. So, any thoughts on PDD Holdings, owner of Temu? So, man, at this point right now, because of certain changes in the behavior of the Chinese government, I just have a problem holding any Chinese stock at this point. It's not that I don't love some. I think Xpeng is a great company, and I think they're doing great things. I think they're going to continue to grow. And like I said back in 2020, they're going to end up outperforming NIO. I didn't anticipate that BYD was actually going to kick Tesla's. If you look at the thumbnail, it looks like I was predicting that BYD was going to kick Tesla's ass, but that was not really what I was predicting. I did not think that they were going to kick Tesla's ass in China, which is what they're doing, right? And in worldwide too, they're very close to being the largest electric vehicle producer in the entire world right now. I don't have any investments in Chinese companies anymore because I think it's entirely likely that we may see our ability to own those even in the form of not EDUs. What am I thinking? I can't remember the word right now for it, but I think that I think that in the future we're going to see our ability to own those being limited. So even BYD is a company that I made quite a bit of money with, but I even disposed of that at this point, largely because it's the ADR. Thank you, Pat. But I think that the regulatory environment is going to prevent us from trading in Chinese ADRs at some point, regardless of whether or not we have a Chinese or we have a Republican or Democratic administration. I just think that's going to happen at some point. So, Yeah, options is the only way we can make it to the capitalist class. Well, the other way you can make it, well, capitalist class is not just having money, it's making everything you need to survive from owning things, not by working, right? So, like, I own all of my own businesses and I do work, but I don't really have to mean to make money, right? I mean, I have to keep owning my businesses to stay alive. I can't just sit there and like live off of my investment interest or anything like that. Like I still have to check in on my businesses, but I don't actually have to work there to keep them going. I do to cut costs and increase profits, right? So that doesn't really make me a capitalist. So I'm like more a capitalist than probably most people that you know, right? Like I make my money by buying businesses generally that are already profitable and finding ways to improve them. And that's what I do. So I guess Trump could sign an executive order stopping them. Um, yes and no. There are all kinds of ways to own shares on foreign stock exchanges. But like I think that we may just see ADRs, a lot of these ADRs go away by tightening of regulations on them. Like it was like Neo came pretty close to being delisted. BYD came pretty close to being delisted. All these guys came pretty close to being delisted because of reporting requirements. And the Chinese government saw reporting requirements as a national secret for some reason when it came to finances. And eventually something was worked out. But a lot of this actually happened during the Trump administration where they made a huge deal about this in the media, but behind the scenes, from what the Chinese are saying, the negotiations were actually just very professional. It was one bureaucratic functionary talking to another bureaucratic functionary. They worked out the details and everything was okay. And even when that went into the Biden administration, that's exactly what happened. Is this was all done in an orderly manner. So yeah. All right, guys, I have been on for 2 hours at this point, which means I think I'm going to call it quits. I want to thank everyone for donating to. I don't know who donated to the fundraiser, but if you did vote for the fundraiser, thank you. I think my goal was only like $200 or something like that, or $100. But yeah, thank you guys very much. And I will see you next time. Don't expect more than like one video a week. If I do two, then it was a miracle, or I was just able to like look at the camera and talk for 5 minutes without stuttering, which generally doesn't happen if I'm trying to like do a video. But yeah, thanks guys. I will see you next time.